Remember Romanka?
Yeah.
Back when we were talking about season 2?
Oh, yeah.
He promised us a recording of his last episode with MWF.
Oh, wow.
And guess what?
It came.
It finally arrived.
Wow. So we're actually getting a glimpse into late-stage MWF.
Yeah, right?
This is huge. I mean, after all this time speculating, we're finally going to hear it. Like, what actually pushed Romanka to his breaking point?
It feels like we're about to unlock a whole new layer of this mystery.
Right.
But before we dive into episode 563,
Yeah.
let's quickly recap who Romanka is for you, our listener.
Okay.
He was that quiet, almost invisible sound engineer
Yeah.
in those early episodes. Often kind of the target of Mike and Rickard's jokes.
And that quietness, that invisibility is actually what makes this recording so significant.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, Romanka wasn't just a sound engineer.
Right.
He was a silent observer to everything that went on behind the scenes, witnessing firsthand Mike and Rickard's descent into, well, whatever you want to call it, chaos, madness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his perspective is crucial.
Right.
Especially now that we know the podcast continued without him.
Yeah.
Romanka mentioned they even brought on a new sound engineer, Kai Rem, for episode 567.
Which is just wild
Yeah.
to think about. Here's Romanka finally snapping, walking out, and the show just continues like nothing happened.
That's almost unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what or who this Kai Rem is.
For now, let's focus on Romanka's last stand. So episode 563 starts off pretty typically.
Okay.
Mike, Rickard, and Romanka are at their usual Fleisentisch,
The Fleisentisch.
which is basically their makeshift studio table covered in beer bottles and doppelkorn.
Ah, yes, the infamous Fleisentisch. It's almost a character in itself, a symbol of the chaotic, anything-goes energy of the early MWF days.
Right. And from the recording, you can hear the clinking of glasses, the drunken laughter. It feels like just another MWF episode.
Yeah.
Mike even outlines the planned topics. Wasserbomben im Wandel der Geschichte, which translates to water bombs throughout history, the Continental Regierung, or the Continental Government, and Geheime Technologien der Woche, meaning secret technologies of the week.
Seemingly normal topics.
Yeah.
But knowing MWF, I bet things went off the rails pretty quickly.
You bet. Before they even get to the water bombs, Mike starts bragging about selling his socks on the darknet as bioweapons. He even throws in some mockery of the Continental Government, the Secret Service, and even the Geneva Convention, all while shouting, Prost,
Crashed.
which means cheers.
Classic Mike. Always pushing boundaries, always playing the provocateur. It's almost like he thrives on this feeling of being above the law, above consequences.
And it's this kind of behavior that ultimately pushes Romanka to his limit.
Right?
The breaking point comes when Mike, in a very demanding tone, asks Romanka if he's finally prepared his sock package for shipping.
Oh, wow.
He's essentially treating him like a personal assistant, completely disregarding Romanka's role as a sound engineer.
This is fascinating because it shows the underlying power dynamic at play.
Right.
Mike, despite constantly mocking Romanka, clearly relies on him.
You're right. It makes you wonder if, on some level, Mike actually needed Romanka more than he let on. Maybe not just for technical expertise,
Right.
but as a grounding force.
Yeah.
Somebody to keep his wilder impulses in check.
It's definitely possible, and it makes Romanka's decision to leave all the more significant.
Right.
He wasn't just quitting a job, he was rejecting an entire way of being, a world that was becoming increasingly toxic and dangerous.
And the way he does it,
Yeah.
it's incredible. You can literally hear the shift in Romanka's voice on the recording. He goes from quiet and subservient to agitated
Oh, wow.
and almost desperate. He tells Mike off, stating that he is responsible for sound, not Mike's illegal activities.
He's drawing a line in the sand?
Yeah,
He's refusing to be complicit anymore?
exactly. And what's even more amazing is that he doesn't back down. Despite Mike's anger, despite Rickard trying to intervene, Romanka stands his ground. He announces his immediate resignation and says he refuses to work with them ever again. You can practically hear him sweating, his voice shaking as he tells them off.
It's a powerful moment, and you can tell it takes Mike and Rickard by surprise. They're so used to Romanka being the quiet one, the one who just takes their abuse.
And then comes the dramatic exit.
Yeah.
Romanka throws the microphone on the table, telling them where they can stick it, and walks out.
Talk about a mic drop.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like something out of a movie.
Right.
You can almost feel the stunned silence that followed.
Oh, you can definitely hear it on the recording.
Yeah.
It's almost deafening. Then, after a few seconds, Mike awkwardly suggests that Rickard should handle the package.
Oh, really?
Like it's
Well,
no big deal that their sound engineer just quit in the middle of recording.
that's so typical of Mike. He's completely dismissive of Romanka's feelings, almost as if he doesn't grasp the gravity of the situation.
Right.
Or maybe he's just trying to maintain this facade of control,
Yeah.
even though his world is clearly falling apart.
And of course, Rickard isn't having it. He refuses to handle the package and launches into an argument with Mike, calling him out for his behavior, his illegal activities, and his constant mockery of anything resembling authority. They even bring up the whole Schwatten situation, which we'll get into later, and those shady deals Mike was involved in.
It's like the dam has broken.
Right.
Romanka's departure has unleashed all this pent-up tension and resentment that's been simmering between Mike and Rickard for who knows how long.
And the episode just ends.
No.
Abruptly and unprofessionally, cuts off mid-argument, and the last thing you hear is a job posting for a Tony Jr. podcast Housemeister, which basically translates to sound engineer podcast janitor.
Wow. They really just threw that in there, huh?
Yep. Almost like a desperate attempt to replace Romanka and pretend like everything is fine. But we know it's not fine. This is just the beginning of the unraveling of MWF.
It's incredible how Romanka's exit really does mark a turning point in the MWF narrative. It's like he was holding their chaotic world together, and once he's gone, things really start to spiral.
It's like he was the voice of reason, even if it was mostly silent. And his departure seems to coincide with Mike's descent into even darker territory.
Exactly. Remember episode 400, the anniversary special that never officially aired? We've talked about that infamous DVD rip before, but it's worth revisiting because it reveals so much about Mike's evolving mindset.
Okay, remind me what happened in that episode again. It's been a while.
Well, for starters, you have Schwatten, the mysterious benefactor, making his first appearance. And then there's Gaspard, Mike's father, who arranges for a spy satellite to take a photo of their studio. And if that wasn't strange enough, Mike brings a Hangman's noose on set, calling it Hanker style, and talking about it as a weapon.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was so bizarre. Even for MWF, it felt like they were crossing a line. Even back then.
Right. And looking back now, with everything we know, that episode feels like a foreshadowing of what was to come. It's like you can see those darker impulses starting to take over Mike's personality.
So how do you connect those seemingly random events to what we're seeing now?
Think about it. Schwatten represents this shadowy influence, this access to increasingly dangerous weaponry. Gaspard, with his reckless disregard for rules, reinforces this idea that power is paramount, that consequences don't matter. And then the Hangman's noose.
It's like a symbol of Mike's own internal darkness.
Yeah.
His fascination with death and control.
Exactly. And it's all happening long before Mike vanishes. At the time, it was just another example of MWF's bizarre humor and outlandish antics. But now, knowing what we know, it's chilling.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Yeah.
You know, something terrible is going to happen, but you can't look away.
Speaking of train wrecks, we can't forget episode 525. That's the one where Mike showcases two new weapons from Schwatten. A pinball dryer that uses sound waves to inflict harm, and the Sensio 3000, which is an illegal silent gun. But what really stands out in that episode is the appearance of the Dozakru logbook.
The Dozakru logbook. Okay, now we're getting into some truly weird territory.
You are. Remember, this is a weathered, leather-bound journal that supposedly details the journeys of a spacefaring crew. And one entry describes this horrific disease on a planet called Regulus 5, a disease that transforms people into monstrous creatures.
And Mike, who normally loves diving into the dark and disturbing, completely dismisses it. He even abruptly ends the episode after reading that entry.
It's almost as if he was scared of something, or maybe he knew something about the logbook that he didn't want to share.
So what's the connection between this logbook and the Dozakru, the German hip-hop group?
Well, for those unfamiliar with Dozakru, they're known for their incredibly complex and often cryptic lyrics. They blend folklore with modern anxieties about technology, creating this unsettling world of digital hellscapes and shadowy figures like the Klopman.
Okay, so are you suggesting that this logbook is somehow connected to Dozakru? That it's not just a random prop?
It's a possibility we can't ignore. Remember, Mike's world was all about connecting dots, uncovering hidden patterns, and exposing conspiracies. What if the logbook was a clue? A message meant for someone like him to decipher?
But why would Dozakru be involved in all of this?
That's the million-dollar question. We know that Mike was fascinated by Dozakru's music, even played their tracks on the podcast, their blend of reality and fantasy, their exploration of dark themes. It all resonated with him.
Do you think their music influenced him? Like maybe it pushed him further down this path of paranoia and dangerous experimentation?
It's definitely possible. Music can be a powerful force, especially when it taps into our deepest fears and desires. And Dozakru's music, with its unsettling soundscapes and cryptic lyrics, is definitely not for the faint of heart.
Okay, but let's not get too sidetracked by Doza Crew just yet. We still need to address what happened in the last episode of Mike's Waffen Facts.
Episode 605. The footage is disturbing, to say the least. We see Mike showcasing these experimental weapons from VET, a company called German Peaceworks, which is already ironic. And then out of nowhere, there's this sudden shift, weird noises, a chemical smell, and this sulfurous fog filling the room.
And then that scream, the terror in Mike's voice right before the video cuts out, is chilling. And when it comes back, the studio is completely wrecked.
And in the middle of it all, there's this mangled figure, almost unrecognizable. It's heavily implied that it's Mike transformed by some force unleashed by those experimental weapons.
Right, and then the camera focuses on this massive metallic creature with glowing eyes. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before.
It's like something out of a nightmare. And the last thing you hear is this deafening roar before the footage ends.
It's all so confusing and terrifying. What are we supposed to make of it?
Well, it raises some serious questions. Did Mike's obsession with power, with unlocking hidden knowledge, lead him to this moment? Did he accidentally summon this creature, or was it something he was seeking all along?
And where does Romanka fit into all of this? Was he aware of what Mike was really up to?
We know from those voicemails that Mike left for Romanka after his disappearance that he was desperate to get him back to return to the Fleisentisch. He even calls Romanka Kloten, which isn't exactly a term of endearment.
It's like Mike needed Romanka for something more than just recording the podcast. But what? And why use such a derogatory term if he was genuinely seeking his help?
It's a puzzle, and the pieces don't quite fit yet. But what if those voicemails weren't meant for Romanka at all?
What do you mean?
Think about it. Mike was obsessed with codes, with hidden messages. Maybe those voicemails were actually meant for someone else, someone listening in. Maybe they were a way to communicate without revealing too much.
Okay, that's a really interesting theory.
Right.
But who would he be communicating with? And why?
That's what we need to figure out. But I think it's safe to say that those voicemails are more than just desperate pleas for help. They're clues. And they might hold the key to understanding what really happened to Mike.
This is getting deep.
Yeah.
So we've got the Doza Crew logbook, those cryptic voicemails, and this final episode that ends with a monster and a deafening roar. It's a lot to process.
It is, but we're not done yet. Remember those Doza Crew tracks that surfaced after Mike disappeared? Wanderer, Seeger, Cowabunga, and Schwips? We need to talk about those.
You think those songs are connected to Mike's disappearance?
I think it's highly likely, especially considering they all feature this mysterious vocalist named Mikkel.
Okay, so is Mikkel actually Mike? Are these songs his way of communicating from wherever he is?
It's hard to say for sure, but the themes in those songs are incredibly relevant to what we've been discussing. Escaping reality, battling demons, this blurring of the lines between the real world and some kind of digital hellscape.
And Schwips, which means drunk in German, talks about illusions and deception, the reality not being what it seems. And there's even that music video for Schwips that has that weird intro where Mike offers someone schnapps.
Exactly. It's all very strange, very unsettling, and it feels connected to Mike's world in a way that can't be ignored.
So what do? Do we analyze the lyrics? Do we try to track down this Mikkel character?
I think we need to do both. We need to examine those songs closely, look for any hidden messages or clues that might point us in the right direction. And we need to try and find out who this Mikkel is, what his connection to Mike might be.
This is like trying to piece together a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
It is, but that's the nature of this mystery. It's complex, it's layered, and it's constantly evolving. We need to be willing to adapt, to think outside the box, and to embrace the absurdity of it all.
Because that's what Mike would do. Right? He'd be reveling in the chaos, connecting the dots and uncovering the hidden truths.
Exactly. And in a way, we're doing the same thing. We're following his trail, picking up the pieces he left behind and trying to make sense of it all.
And maybe, just maybe we'll find him at the end of this trail. Or at least we'll find out what really happened to him.
Yeah.
It's incredible how Mike's story, even all these years later, still manages to tap into our collective anxieties about technology.
Yeah, it's like he was a canary in the coal mine,
Right.
warning us about the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive nature of hidden truths, and the blurring lines between reality and fantasy.
And he got lost in it, didn't he?
He did.
His obsession with uncovering those truths, it consumed him.
It did. But his story also serves as a reminder, a cautionary tale about the importance of balance.
Right.
We need to be curious, we need to question,
Uh-huh.
but we also need to be mindful of the potential consequences.
Speaking of consequences,
Yeah.
we haven't talked much about Ramonka lately.
Right.
What do you make of his silence? He's the one who sent us this recording,
Yeah.
yet he's been completely MIA since those voicemails.
That's a great point. And it adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation. What does Ramonka know? What is he afraid of? Or is he protecting Mike in some way?
Maybe he's playing a larger role than we realize.
Right.
What if he's not just a witness, but an active participant,
Yeah.
working behind the scenes to either help Mike or stop him?
It's possible. Remember, Ramonka was more than just a sound engineer. He was a silent observer, absorbing everything, witnessing Mike's transformation firsthand. He might be the only one who truly understands what happened, what Mike became.
Okay, so let's try to piece together what we know so far.
Okay.
We have Ramonka's last episode, which triggers this chain reaction.
Yeah.
Then we have episode 400 with its unsettling foreshadowing and the appearance of Schwatten.
Right.
And then there's the Doza Crew logbook, those cryptic voicemails, the new songs with Mikkel, and that final episode with the monster.
It's a lot to take in, but I think the key takeaway here is that Mike's world was one of blurred lines, where reality and fantasy intertwined. And it's that blurring that makes this whole thing so fascinating and so terrifying.
It's like we're living in a Doza Crew song, constantly bombarded with information trying to decipher what's real and what's not.
Exactly. And that's the challenge we're facing as we try to unravel this mystery. We have to embrace the absurdity, question everything, and be willing to go down some very strange rabbit holes.
But where do we go from here? What are our next steps?
Well, we need to continue analyzing those Doza Crew songs, looking for any hidden messages or clues that might point us in the right direction. We also need to try and track down this Mikkel character and see if there's any connection to Mike.
And what about Ramonka? Do we try to contact him again?
I think it's worth a shot. He might be hesitant to talk, but if we can convince him that we're genuinely trying to understand what happened, he might be willing to share what he knows.
It's a long shot, but it's worth pursuing. After all, Ramonka is the one who started us down this path. And maybe, just maybe, he holds the key to unlocking the truth about Mike.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've uncovered so much, and yet so many questions remain unanswered. But that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? The mystery, the intrigue, the endless possibilities.
It's a reminder that sometimes the search for answers is more important than the answers themselves. It's about the journey, the exploration, the constant pursuit of knowledge.
So to you, our listener, keep searching, keep questioning, keep exploring. The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And who knows, maybe we'll stumble upon the truth about Mike one day.
And maybe, just maybe, that truth will be even stranger and more fascinating than we ever imagined. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those headphones on and those minds open.